And welcome back to our rankings episode where we were talking about running backs earlier. We're going to move on to our top 5 wide receivers. And both you and I, Chris, have a unanimous number 1, and that's Justin Jefferson. I don't think there's any question that this guy has what it takes to be the number 1 wide receiver again. In fact, there is a pathway for him to get better than he was last year because he has increased yardage by 200 yards each season. He's also increased his targets by 20 targets, to be honest with you, or receptions, not targets, sorry, receptions from 88 to 108 to 128. So he's gone not only 200 yards, but he's also gone up 20 targets per season, or receptions per season. His targets have gone up.
You're saying he's going to break the receiving record this year.
I think he can. I think here's the thing. There were some games last year where we kind of got lost, where he didn't really do a great job with the targets he had. And part of it was because he was dealing with some top end coverages. I mean, when he played the Jets, they kind of shut him down that second time. And a couple other weeks he got shut down.
Jair Alexander shut him down the second
time we saw him too. So if you take games like that where he was completely shut down, which I don't think should be the case, considering they now have 3 very capable wide receivers this year, plus the fact that you lose Dalvin Cook, as we were talking about earlier, that you now have to look at this guy as being a premier receiver on a high volume passing offense, and a guy who also the touchdowns were going a lot to Dalvin Cook in that red zone. That may change with the Alexander Madison being the starter there.
Yeah, here's my one knock on Justin Jefferson. A lot of his touchdowns came on big plays, 20 plus yards. He's not a very big red zone target. Thielen was that. Now with Thielen gone, we don't know if KJ Osborne's going to be that. We don't know if TJ Hawkinson. What we do know is that Dalvin Cook's not there. So like you alluded to, this offense is going to go strictly to passing. I can't see a scenario where Alexander Madison is getting 250 plus touches or carries, let me say. He might have touches, but carries, I don't think he's going to have that. So this offense is going to shift a lot more towards passing, and they were already one of the premier passing teams in the league. Now here, there is some downside, like that kind of progression is not sustainable because now we're looking at unprecedented numbers. If he goes 200 more yards receiving, he's at 2,000, over 2,000 yards. You were saying he's going to have 148 receptions if he keeps increasing on that number. So I think there is some plateauing. But like you said, there's TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne. I don't think teams are going to be able to scheme to just take away Justin Jefferson again.
Yeah.
And I think that might open up more things for him, especially in the big play. So, I mean, I love Justin Jefferson. He's unanimously the number 1. I think there are 2 other guys that can be in that discussion, but that's it. There's 3 guys in the discussion, and that's it for me. But Justin Jefferson could very well be the wide receiver number 1 overall by a long margin again.
Well, here's my thing about him last year. He had 4 games last year where he was held under 50 yards, and they all came on low volume except for one of them early against the Eagles. So that's that week 2 against the Eagles. He had 6 receptions on 12 targets for only 48 yards. They did a good job of shutting him down there, but all the other games, 3 for 6 in receptions for 14 yards, 3 for 5 for 33 yards, 1 for 5 for 15, 4 for 5 for 38. I don't see those games happening that often. And to me, I think that was less on Jefferson, and I think it was a nod to the defenses, but I think it was a little bit more on Kirk Cousins and how that offense schemed against. And if you look at that, out of those games where he was down that low, they lost 3 out of the 4 of those games. So I think you see a correlation with the victories for the Vikings as well as his success in the air, through the air. So I think you're going to see a little bit of a change. I think there's going to see more games maybe where he's like 6 for 8, but he did that twice last year, and he was 6 for 8 2 games in a row against Miami and Arizona. He had 107 yards against Miami, 98 against Arizona. So no touchdowns on either of those games, but again, I think he's going to have a big uptick in touchdowns because he went 2 in week 1 against Green Bay, and he didn't have another touchdown for 5 weeks, I believe it was. No, 6 weeks till week 8. And I don't see there being that big of a gap again, in my opinion.
That's kind of my one knock on him for who my number 2 is the number 2 is just volume, just the same, but he's a red zone threat. He scores a lot of touchdowns. And if he didn't get hurt last year, he could have been the number 1 too. I think that both the guys last year, my 2 and my 3, that we'll talk about, if they didn't have injuries to either themselves or to their quarterback, they could have been better than Justin Jefferson was last year. And the knock on him is that it's the touchdowns, right? It's he's not targeting in the red zone. So, and he needs the big play to score. And he gets the volume, he gets the receptions, he gets the yardage. That's fine. In PPR, that's absolutely fine. He's going to be a monster in PPR. But this is also why you kind of alluded to, this is why I love running backs in the first round, especially in the top 5 picks, rather than going and get one of these wide receivers, is because even like the top 3 running backs, they're still going to post up 10 points. Like it's very hard for them not to have get to that 10-point mark. With wide receivers, they can get schemed out of a game. It's very easy to get schemed out of a game, especially if a team is just like, we're gonna let KJ Osborne beat me. We're gonna let Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson beat us. We're not gonna let Justin Jefferson beat us. And you saw it with the second Green Bay game when they played and Jair Alexander just shut him down, and Green Bay schemed to just get him out of the game. Like, let someone else have a big game. We don't care. Justin Jefferson is not going to beat us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we both agree he's the number 1 guy. I don't disagree with that. I feel like it also is tough to just say, hey, yeah, the 3 guys are going to give you 10 top 3 running backs are going to give you 10 points. But here's the thing is someone like Justin Jefferson is going to be a game breaker, a week winner for you at the wide receiver position. Whereas that maybe that running back 3 may not be that. He just may be a steady Eddie for you. And we'll talk about my number 2, who actually falls into your number 3. And then we'll bring up your number 2 afterwards, which is my number 4. But Tyreek Hill is my number 2 here. Finished the season off with 119 receptions, 1,700 yards, and 7 touchdowns. All, I believe, was career highs in yardage for sure, and maybe receptions.
Yardage was. Touchdowns was not.
Touchdowns was not, but I think receptions and yardage were. And again, that was multiple games without
7 games.
Tua. 7 games total without Tua.
5 games that Tua missed, and 2 games where he got hurt early in the game.
But that being said, he was still heavily involved, even with the backup wide receivers or backup quarterbacks. I think the wide receiver that took the biggest hit in those backups for a couple of the games, not all of them, was more Jalen Waddle. Because if you look at it, there were games of 15 targets, 13 targets, 14 targets. It wasn't until the week 3 and the last game of the season he had 5 or less targets in a game, and that's what you want out of your number 1 wide receivers. As many double-digit target games as you can get out of him, the better. And his reception percentage was pretty high in a lot of those games. Only missed 2 or 3 receptions. The big thing for him, he had 7 touchdowns, just like Jefferson had 8. He had a big gap again, 6 games in a row from week 2 to week 9 where he had 0 touchdowns. So same exact pattern as Justin Jefferson. So again, I think there should be an increase in touchdowns with him as usual. I think it's going to be hard to key just on him when you have Jalen Waddle. And you got to say that when you're picking Tyreek Hill or Waddle on your team, is you are thinking 100% Tua is going to be healthy all 17 games of the year. You can't sit there thinking to yourself, well, I got to hinge my bets. I don't like him because it's all based on Tua's health. Well, yeah, that's true. But the goal here is that you're drafting a guy that's going to stay healthy himself as well as his quarterback. You could say that about any player on here. Is like, oh, I want to draft Eckler or I want to draft CMC 1 overall, but I really hope he stays healthy. There's other running backs healthier for 17 more weeks, but they're not going to give you the volume and the value that those guys we're talking about here are. So injuries aside, he has a chance to go up over 1,800 yards and get near the 2,000-yard mark himself too, just because of how his big playability and deep downfield targets.
I mean, even let's look at the seven games that Tua missed, and Tyreek Hill still posted up over 1,700 yards. You don't think that Tyreek could have gotten 250 more yards or 270 more yards, whatever he needed to get to 2,000.
Over 7 games, absolutely.
Over 7 games, and then throw in 2 touchdowns in that.
Yeah.
Like he could have been the number one wide receiver without a doubt last year. So I do like him there. I have him as my number 3. But he's the other guy that I think can be the number 1 overall. If I were a betting man, like that's those 3 guys are who I'm putting my bet on. Like, I'm not looking for dark horses to come up and say, these guys are in the offense. They have the talent and they have the explosive play to have, to be able to be in that top discussion. A lot of these other guys might rely on having a miraculous season, look at like Jamal Williams from the running back position, having 17 touchdowns last year. Like, it's just abnormal, right? It's normal for Tyreek Hill to expect Tyreek Hill to go off for 1,500 yards in a season. It's normal to think that he's going to have 6+ touchdowns in a season. And to think that those numbers could go up with a healthy Tua is something that I would love to have. Like I said, he's kind of in that discussion for me. I do have him one spot down, and we'll talk about the next guy where why I like him more. But with Tyreek, you love this offense, and he's a mismatch nightmare. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, unlike Justin Jefferson and some of these other wide receivers, there's no cornerback that can keep up with him. Yeah. So, like, you can't man-to-man cover him. So, and he's so good at, like, extending the play, coming across the middle. And Mike McDaniels is so creative on getting him the ball in space and allowing him speed to be fully utilized and to have that big playability with that. How many 60-yard touchdowns did we see last year because 2 guys miss a tackle and he's gone to the house?
Well, exactly. As soon as, you got to respect Jalen Waddle and you got to respect the other players on the team, that if a safety pulls off for even a half a second on coverage, it's going to be a over-the-top throw to Tyreek Hill, touchdown. I mean, we saw it in Kansas City. We see it here in Miami. The thing for me is when looking at a guy like this, before, we'll move on to your next guy, who you have it to, is when you look at Tyreek Hill, there's only a few wide receivers out there that are viable to go for 200 yards in a game, like yardage wise. And it's because his big playability. He doesn't have to rely on volume to get there either. Now, last year, he had 9 catches for 146 in a game. Then another game, he did have 11 for 190. But when you're looking at yardage per reception, he can be up there. I mean, Waddle was 18.1, but he was 14.3, and that's with a couple off weeks. You take out those off weeks, and he's right up there with Waddle. I mean, 7 catches for 143. You go over all these stats, he can hit 200 yards in a game. And that's what the scary thing that he can do. And when you look at Justin Jefferson, he's another one too. 193, 184, 223. And the guy that we're going to talk about now, who's your number 2, did the same thing 2 years ago. And even last year, I believe when looking at his game logs, he even had a couple games really close up there too. So that's what we're talking about when talking about these top 5 guys. It's scary, the volume that they can put up in both yardage and reception. So your number 2, who's my number 4, and I'll explain why, is Cooper Kupp. So tell me your thoughts on why you like him over Tyreek Hill and why you have him as your number 2.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp, you look at last year and before he got hurt, and 13 receptions week 1, 128 yards. Mm-hmm. Week 2, 11 receptions, 100, and he had a touchdown week 1. Then 2 touchdowns. He had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns before he got hurt in week 10.
Yeah.
He had 7 more games to play.
He actually got hurt in week 9, so he had 8 more games. Technically, he didn't even play the full amount of the game.
No, he got hurt in week 10.
Yeah.
Game 9.
Game 9, week 10. Sorry, yes.
Yeah. And so he had 6 touchdowns in those games. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those weeks he had over 100 yards. Like, he is a touchdown machine. And so he's on pace, to have 12, 13 touchdowns easily through the season. And before he got hurt, and then Stafford gets hurt, that team was a mess last year, and I think you're going to be able to get him on a discount, and getting him at the number 2 or the number 3 is a discount.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, because he's not going to fall way down. He's going to be one of those top three receivers off the board. I seen Jamar Chase go above him, and people forget that 2 years ago. Well, 2 years ago he had 1,947 yards. He almost broke. He was 53 yards away from breaking 2,000 as a receiver.
I thought he was going to do it too.
He had 16 touchdowns that year.
It's tough to do. Yeah, 16 touchdowns is wild, but it's tough to do the 2,000 yards when you look at it, because week 4 he had 64 yards that year. He didn't go below 90 any other game. So you're talking about massive numbers. But again, we're talking about guys that have a chance to hit 200 yards in a week. And he had he posted a 163, a 136. That's at 156 that year.
Yeah, and this is why what I was talking about with Justin Jefferson, and the same goes for Tyreek Hill, is neither one of those guys are hyper targeted in the red zone. Cooper Kupp is. Cooper Kupp is a red zone machine. And there's really no one else there. So we can expect, with a healthy Stafford, with Cooper Kupp coming back off his injury. I mean, he got hurt early in the season, and he only tore his ACL. So he should be back completely healthy coming back week 1. And he wasn't this explosive player. What makes him so great is at the top of his route, he's so dynamic on eluding defenders and getting into open space. He's great at sitting down in zones. He's great at top of the route, man to man. He gets open all the time. And Stafford being Stafford, and people want to knock on Stafford really, but he is one of the, in terms of talent, he's one of the elite talents in the NFL as a thrower, for sure. And people disregard that because of all the time he played in Detroit. But you look at the throws that he makes, and the kind of the no look throws, or the arm angle throws. Before Mahomes was doing that, you had Rodgers and Stafford doing that. And people forget how good Stafford actually is. And when he has a healthy Cooper Kupp, it's not far-fetched to think that he's going to go off for 10 plus touchdowns easily, and then 1,500 yards easily, because he's hyper targeted. There's really no one there. Like, Van Jefferson's on the other side, Tutu Atwell. They drafted a rookie this year whose name is escaping me at the moment. And we do think that this team is going to run the ball with Cam Akers, but that's going to open a lot more for Cooper Kupp. If they're throwing the ball 30 times in a game, Cooper Kupp's probably going to get 15 of those targets.
Yeah, so and the thing was, Cooper Kupp couldn't be covered anyway, even when there were, Robert Woods, in the back, and you had Allen Robinson, who really was just like somebody out there, a body. But it doesn't matter who they put out there. Cooper Kupp will still get the top coverage, but then he moves around all over the place, and he can beat the top coverage because he's such a great route runner, and his ability at the top of the route to create separation is what does it for him. And that's what I think helps Matt Stafford out more than anything, is he has a guy, it's not only a safety valve, but a go-to guy. He uses them in both aspects. So it's not like Cooper Kupp, if open, is going to get the ball. Cooper Kupp's getting the ball when push comes to shove and you need a safety outlet. It's not the tight end. It's not going to be the running back. It's going to be Cooper Kupp. One thing to note. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I want to finish with one comment.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was going to be note when we're talking about, especially in standard league, PPR, obviously these numbers get crazy inflated, but in standard scoring, only the top 5 running backs scored more points than Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, like top finishers or wide receivers. Everybody after that, they were above. And when I say top 5, really it was the top 4 that had any kind of separation, if you consider that. But when you break down the amount of points per week difference between the number 4 running back and Justin Jefferson, it ended up being like literally a point a week difference. So when you're looking at a difference maker on your team, if that gets mitigated, if Justin Jefferson gets another 10, another 15 yards here, another 10 yards there, and a touchdown in this game, next thing you know, Justin Jefferson is better than, the top, everybody but the top 3 running backs. So it is okay to draft one of these guys 1 overall if you really have confidence that you want to have that guy on your team. You like that guy on your team. There's nothing wrong with going Jefferson over McCaffrey or Eckler. I mean, McCaffrey last year, finished with 273. Justin Jefferson would finish with 240. It's a 30-point difference over the course of 17 weeks. When you break it down that way, it's not a lot of points per week. So when we say these guys are special and these top 5 guys we have are in our top 5 for a reason, it's because they can score a lot of points for you in fantasy football on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I'm gonna spend the last couple seconds talking about my defense of Allen Robinson. Okay, I don't think it was Allen Robinson being there. I think the fact that everyone got disappointed that Allen Robinson was on the other side, and we all thought Allen Robinson was going to take some receptions away. The fact that Cooper Kupp still was hyper targeted with a talent like Allen Robinson on the other side, and even when OBJ was there, minus the Super Bowl, Cooper Kupp was targeted, high volume targeted every game. It doesn't matter who's on the other side, and that's why I love Cooper Kupp at my number 2 instead of Tyreek Hill. Is that it doesn't matter. Tyreek Hill could be on the other side. Cooper Kupp's still going to get hyper volume thrown to him because he's always open, always. Yeah. And he catches everything. He has a very low drop rate as well. So that's my defense of Allen Robinson. Will rest at that, and that's only because I drafted him high last year and he disappointed me.
He disappointed me the year before, and I drafted him high too. So, but he was also on the Chicago Bears, so there's that reason. But let me talk about who. So that is your number 2. Let's go to number 3 here, and my number 3.
Well, this would be number 4. This would be number our consensus. Our consensus number 4. You have him ranked at 2 or 3.
Well,
I have him ranked at 5.
Yeah, I have him ranked at 3. You have him ranked at so technically our consensus number 3 would be Cooper. Consensus number 3 would be Cooper Kupp. Consensus number 4 for us is Ja'Marr Chase. I have him as my number 3. You have him as your number 4. To me, Ja'Marr Chase, it's not that he gets slept on. I think obviously the stardom of Justin Jefferson is great, and Ja'Marr Chase has been hindered with a little bit of injury here and there, especially this past season. But that being said, he still came out the gates as a rookie with 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns. And last year, he only played 12 games. He had 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. So he bested Jefferson in touchdowns in 5 less games. Now, did I expect him to get 800 more yards in those 5 games? No. That's just ridiculous. So what I think, the thing about Jefferson that gives him a nod to me over Cooper Kupp is he does have the touchdown ability, but his quarterback gives me with the nod. I just like Joe Burrow a little better than Matt Stafford in terms of getting the ball to Justin Jefferson and that offense getting the ball in the red zone a lot more often. Ja'Marr Chase, sorry. Getting the ball in the red zone a lot more often than the Rams are, because I just think the offense in Cincinnati is better than the Rams offense, even though 2 years ago they end up losing the Super Bowl to them. But again, I can have this, flip-flop 3 and 4, in my opinion, between Chase and Kupp, because the two of them are going to get the lion's share. The two of them are going to get great opportunities. The two of them are great catchers. Obviously, Kupp, I think, has a little bit better hands. But that being said, Kupp and Ja'Marr Chase here, in my opinion, is going to get over double-digit touchdowns again, and I could see him being around 1,600 yards this year.
Yeah, this is where I disagree with you on a couple of those points. And this is what I'll say. The same way that Travis Kelce is in a tier of his own, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, and Justin Jefferson are in a tier of their own. Mm-hmm. And there's everyone else after that. So Chase, what did he finish last year as the wide receiver? 12 overall, right? Yeah. And so he missed 5 games last year due to an injury. But his one knock, he had 6 games that where he scored under 10 points. So he had 2 games where he scored 25 plus points, because he had 2 touchdowns over 130 yards in both those games. Mm-hmm. But he had 6 weeks where he was not targeted. Yes, do I like the Cincinnati Bengals offense better? Absolutely. Do I like Joe Burrow as a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford? Absolutely. But Joe Mixon is still there. Joe Mixon had a 5-touchdown game last year. You think they're throwing the ball? You think Ja'Marr Chase is involved in that game? No. T. Higgins is there. T. Higgins is still commanding. We've talked about it. He being a 1A to a 1B to Jamar Chase's 1A. When you have that, when that 1A 1B situation, and it's a little bit different than Tyreek Hill and Waddle because they both get volume there. The same thing applies for Jamar Chase and for T. Higgins. Is they're splitting the target shares. With Cooper Kupp, you're not. With Cooper Kupp, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. He's getting the target shares. He's getting 40% of passes that are thrown his way, and Jamar Chase is not getting that. Am I saying that he is not worthy of a top 5? No, he's my number 4 ranked wide receiver, but he's more cautionary. Like those top 3, I feel secure. I know I'm going to draft a stud. I'm not as confident with Jamar Chase as being a top 5 at the end of the year as I am with the other guys.
Well,
I've talked about it before where I think that I've seen the rankings of Jamar Chase in the top 3 or even as number 1 wide receiver.
Number 1's ridiculous to me, but
I cannot make an argument for him being that. You look at the stats over his career. He is talented. He is fast. He has a rapport with Joe Burrow. Yes, all these things are correct. You're not wrong. These people aren't wrong on any of that. What they're wrong in is that offense and the way they scheme is Joe Mixon still runs the ball a lot. And Joe and Jamar Chase he has games where he doesn't completely disappear, but he's held in check. And like if he's getting top coverage, Joe Burrow's not going to just throw the ball to him when he's being covered. They have T. Higgins on the other side. They have Tyler Boyd. Like they have other weapons there that they just are going to use. And I guess you can make that same argument for Justin Jefferson this year. Is there's other weapons there, but I still think just the pure talent alone, Jefferson is way better than Chase.
Well, yeah, Jefferson's growth shows you that he is that offense, that he's going to be heavily involved. That being said, that set aside, I don't necessarily think Jamar Chase is not going to be heavily involved. I mean, we talk about it. He was a wide receiver 1 2 weeks in a row. He was a wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 3. He did have 4 weeks in a row where he seemed to quote unquote disappear because he had 8 points or less and didn't hit double digits. But that being said, he was
targeted a lot in all those games.
I was going to say it wasn't because of targets. It was because of receptions and yards per reception there. So that being said, I see what you're saying. I have him as the reason why I like him as a number 3 is not because I don't like Cooper Kupp. It's because I do like Joe Burrow that much more. And the fact that he played 12 games last year and he was targeted 134 times. The number that scares me a little bit is the 87 receptions. Like you want to see that number and 134 targets be higher than 87. I mean, that's 64%, compared to someone like Tyreek Hill who goes for 70, somebody like, he had 119 Tyreek Hill and still had 1,700 yards, Cooper Kupp, he's in the 73% range. And then, one of the other top receivers last year, Devontae Adams, he had a low catch percentage last year. But in order for that to happen, you need to have the 180 targets he had. So the fact that he had 137 targets and it was in that 64%, if he gets that number up to 68 to 71% this year with the target share he's going to hold on that, yes, there's other mouths to feed and everything like that, but 134 targets in 12 games is a lot. That's an awful lot. That's wide receiver 1. That's top 5 wide receiver numbers. I expect him to be around that range. I expect him, if he finished, would have been a top 3 receiver in the NFL last year because 9 touchdowns in 12 games. I think he would have went up on that. That's where I see him, is that his touchdown capital is just too good to pass up. And I know Cooper Kupp had that the year before, and Cooper Kupp had a ton of touchdowns too. That's why I said, to me, they're interchangeable. I just like Joe Burrow that much more, and I think that offense is going to score more points than the Rams will. That's why I like it.
We're arguing the 3 spot versus the 4 spot. So
but that's what we got to do.
They're both in our top 4. But you're looking at these details, and that again, this is where I value him a little bit more. I value Cooper Kupp a little bit more just because of the volume that goes his way. Whereas Chase is competing with target share, and he's in an offense that Mixon will. The team itself is going to find the best way to win, not just hyper target on on one or two players.
Yeah.
And we've seen it. We've seen weeks where both him and T. Higgins are not really heavily involved, where they bring the number 3 in, or the tight ends are more involved, or Joe Mixon's involved, and
well,
you don't
to me,
that.
what you got to say though is involvement is the wrong term, because Chase was involved every single week.
Let's say production.
Production, because he had 1 week where he had 6 targets, he had 4 catches, still had 81 yards in that game. But
lowest targets.
His lowest target that game. But what I'm saying, he gets the targets, so he gets involved. It's just a matter of the actual production out of that involvement. Are there going to be some screen passes? Are there going to be quick slants, like stuff where he can be tackled real quick? Because, yards per target for him last year, he had some games where his yards per target were like 6 yards per target. And then he had other games where they were an average of 13 yards per target. So that's, I think, the difference in him is his route tree. It can be short, it can be long, because of the talent around him, where people like Cooper Kupp and people like Justin Jefferson, they're running all of them. And they're also running a lot of big plays downfield, because of the fact of the matter is they are the talent.
Well, and this is just my preference. Even him sitting at the 4, I'd rather have T. Higgins 2 rounds later. I think it's a better value.
Well, we talked about that. I agree. I like the value of him much better. I do. I agree. I think T. Higgins in the late second, early third round on that turn is, to me, much more valuable than taking Ja'Marr Chase early in that first round.
Yeah.
Now, if Ja'Marr Chase falls to you at the end of the first round and he's sitting there at 10, 11, 12, now you're talking about value in the first round to get somebody like Ja'Marr Chase.
If he's sitting there at 8 or 9, you should take him. Don't get me wrong. But he's not a late round first pick. Like he should be drafted earlier on. Like I would say he's my top 9 player on the board. I think Travis Kelce, I'd put insert him, and I probably have 4 running backs that are above him as well. But yeah, if I'm sitting there at the 9 spot and he's off the board, or he's not off the board, then I'm going to take him there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about our UNMS number 5 to close out this episode here. And that's a 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro Davante Adams. I think it's hard to ever take him out of the top 5, even with a season like last year where he had a 55% catch percentage. But when you're targeted 180 times, you get 100 catches, 14 touchdowns on 1,500 yards, you can almost guarantee that going into this season, he's going to have that volume. He's going to have that touchdown capital, and and that's with Josh Jacobs having the best rushing year of any running back last year. So do you see, in your opinion, Davante Adams being up there again in the 150 to 180 target range and over 100 receptions? And do you see him hitting double-digit touchdowns for the 4th year in a row?
The touchdowns might take a decline. He might be at the 9 or 8 to 10 range, I would say. But I just think he's too talented. I don't care if Jimmy G is throwing him the ball. Like, he's just too talented to just disappear in offenses. There's no Darren Waller there. We expect Josh Jacobs to have some kind of regression. And so that offense, they're probably not going to be a very good team. And so they're going to be behind in games. They're going to have to throw the ball. Jimmy G can throw the ball, and he can throw the ball all over the field, and he's great in play action. I think Davante Adams, again, he's high volume red zone guy. And you take away the other high volume red zone guy with Darren Waller, and now he's the only one there. I mean, Jacoby Myers isn't really a big red zone target. Hunter Renfrow is, but we saw his decline last year. I don't expect him to be anything more than a number 3 receiver there. So yeah, I mean, I think that, again, he's both of our number 5s. I can make arguments for other people there too. And the whole argument would be that Jimmy G is the quarterback and this offense is not very good, but just on talent alone, and production over his entire career, no matter who's thrown him the ball, he's been there. We thought that, once Derek Carr got benched, he was, Davante Adams' numbers were going to go down, and they didn't. That's why I like him there. I can't really make a strong argument for anyone else over him. I can make arguments for it, but they're just not very strong.
Yeah, and I agree with the same exact, my sentiment exactly is that you can argue Stephon Diggs, you can argue CeeDee Lamb, what you're arguing is potential for this season versus trying to argue away from consistency that you have gotten out of Davante Adams and the consistency that he gives to an NFL team. I mean, the fact that, yeah, in 2019, he only had 5 touchdowns. He played 12 games, had 127 targets, under 1,000 yards. He was injured for a little bit I think it was a foot injury. And Aaron Rodgers that season had an okay season. I think it ended up being something like 28 touchdowns. He was under 30. That being said, you give, say, 28 to 29 touchdowns passing to Jimmy G, under 30 in the same scenario. I still see Davante Adams getting himself 10 of those touchdowns. I just don't see it going to other people. I think the targets he's going to get peppered. I think it's going to be often, maybe not 180 targets, but for him to get back down to the 160, I think is huge. And if he gets back up to his catch percentage, which I think the accuracy issues of Derek Carr aren't going to be there, he gets back up into the 70s, high 60s, 70 range, which he had 2 previous seasons with Aaron Rodgers, who's an accurate passer. I think you give yourself over 100 receptions. I think he gets back up close to 1,500 yards again and double-digit touchdowns. So to me, you don't need to have a Pro Bowl all-pro quarterback throwing him the ball for him to produce. Some other receivers that are below him on this list, I think, do. And that's why I keep him at the 5 spot.
Yeah, I agree.
So that being said, is our sneak peek for our final rankings. Our rankings should be out in August, and we will post a link up on all our social media and have a special release episode as well, where Chris and I are going to talk about our biggest discrepancies between our rankings and ones that we both agree on that maybe some other people don't agree on, especially some other of the professionals in the industry. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Professional.
Other professionals is what I said. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to click that notification button so you know when we drop our new episodes each week. Keep an eye out for our next episode where we're going to be talking about our quarterbacks and tight ends, where we give you the top 5 sneak peek rankings for our list there. And it's going to get interesting. Thank you all.